also in verse 35, 37, and received a double portion of the family inheritance. The Muslim, as the adherents of Islam are called, further supports their position of the right of the firstborn son by citing Deuteronomy on chapter 21, verse 15 to 17, which says, "If a man has two wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be her that was hated, then it shall be, when he make his son to inherit that which he has, that he might not make the son of beloved firstborn." Before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he should acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he had. For he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. The purpose of the Muslim in citing this biblical passage is to show that it was the firstborn of Abraham, Ismail, the father of the Arab, and not the secondborn, Isaac, the progenitor of the Israelites, who was to fulfill the promise that God made to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, 1-3. God said, "Hear that of Abraham's seed shall all the family of the earth be blessed." And his seed, according to Muslim belief, was fulfilled in Ismail, the firstborn son of Abraham according to Hebrew law. To refute this claim, it is only necessary to show that it was God himself, who is not bound by the law for man, who made the choice between Ismail and Isaac in the case of Abraham. Although it can be argued that Hagar was not. In actuality, Abraham's wife, Genesis 16:1 to verse 3, the important point here is that it was God who made the promise to Abraham. And it was God who chose Isaac for the fulfillment of the promise. After the birth of Ismail, God appeared to Abraham and talked with him about Ismail and the forthcoming birth of Isaac in this old age. The Genesis records say that Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, "Should a child be born to him that is 100 years old, and should Sarah that is 90 years old bear?" And Abraham said unto God, "Oh, that Ishmael may live before you." And God said, "Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son indeed, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant with him and with his seed after him. And as for Ismail, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall be badged, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear to you at this set time in the next year." God also said to Abraham, "For in Isaac shall your seed be called," in Genesis 21, chapter 21, verse 12, and in Romans chapter 9, verse 7. And the New Testament explicitly confirm that the seed of promise to Abraham was Jesus Christ. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 16 and verse 19 and verse 29. Islam teaches in the Quran that Muhammad was the seal of the prophet of God. Surah 33 to 40, presenting Jesus as just one of the prophets. In attempt to prove this false claim, the Muslim used the Old Testament passage that pointed to the coming of Jesus and applied them to the coming of Muhammad. For instance, they used Genesis 49, chapter 49, verse 10, to show that into him should the gathering of the people be, applying it to Muhammad. But they conveniently ignore the fact in that verse that the him, Shiloh, was to come out of Judah, and Judah was an Israelite, a descendant of Isaac, and not an Arab and descendant of Ishmael. The Old Testament is replete with passages reflecting the fact that the prophet of God was to come out of Israel. The Muslim also attempt to use Moses' word of a prophet from the midst of you, of your brethren like me. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15. The bolster their claim for Muhammad, the prophethood, but the fulfillment of this passage as it applied to Jesus is shown in Acts chapter 3, verse 19-26. In responding to the challenge of Muslims regarding the prophethood of Jesus and Muhammad, Christianity need but show that Jesus Christ was that prophet to whom all of the prophets of God pointed. Is in John chapter 1, verse 19-31, and chapter 4, verse 25-26, and chapter 6, verse 14. And that Jesus was even more than a prophet, as should be dealt with later in this discourse. And it is quite evident in the New Testament scripture that Jesus fulfilled all the prophecy regarding him in the Old Testament. You find it in Luke chapter 24, verse 44. And thus become God only universal prophet whom all men must hear and obey. In Hebrew chapter 1, verse 1-4. Being the culminating seed of his father Abraham. The Holy Book, which one? Muhammad claimed of being the seal of the prophet, displacing Jesus, is accompanied by his claim of producing a holy book, the Quran, revealed in Arabian desert to him by God and replacing the Bible. Muslims therefore present the affirmation that the Quran is the last and complete revelation of God to man. But Muslims do not understand that the Quran inadvertently authenticates the validity of the Bible as God's last and complete revelation to man. 1 minute. One more minute. These two books, however,